Swing parties are a whole thing. It's like a vibe, but I didn't know that when I first got invited. Let me rewind a bit. It was about a year ago. A regular Friday night after a long work week, and my friend Lisa, who's, let's say, a bit more adventurous than me, called me up out of nowhere. She was like, "Girl, you need to come with me to this party. It's gonna be a blast." Now, Lisa's always dragging me into weird stuff, but I'd never heard of swing parties before, and honestly I thought it was a joke. But she promised it'd be fun, and let's be honest, after the kind of week I'd had, where I got screamed at by my boss, spilled coffee on my favorite shirt, and had the weirdest date night with some guy who thought talking about his ex was a good icebreaker, I thought, sure, why not? I show up, and there's Lisa, grinning like the Cheshire Cat. She's got this sparkly vibe that I can never pull off. I'm wearing a plain dress, like the least fun dress ever. But Lisa's like, "Trust me, it's low-key, just chill." But low-key. So we walk into this wild scene. There are people everywhere. Not too many people, but enough for me to feel, very out of place. And let me just say, first of all, nothing prepared me for what was about to go down. The music is bumping, lights are flashing, and there are a bunch of people standing around. Well, let's just say, in various stages of undress. At first I'm like, what the heck? Is this a weird dream? But then my eyes land on a few familiar faces. People from my office, my gym, even that one woman from my yoga class. You know, the one who does that thing with her hands that always looks like she's about to do something a little sketchy. But is here. So anyway, long story short, I felt totally out of my element. And then the real fun began. Because after about half an hour of trying not to make awkward eye contact with random strangers and avoiding too much whipped cream splatter, I got pulled into an actual event. In a few minutes I was already covered in mayonnaise, I'm not even kidding. This dude, who I'm still not sure was even invited, decided to, well, decorate me. And I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The next thing I know, I'm a walking hot dog. I was covered in ketchup, my waist was covered in personal ketchup, because there were so many customers at once. I felt so ridiculous, but you know what? I got over it. Like, it hurt, but it was okay. Anyway, after that night, I vowed to never ever go back to a swing party again. My pride was squashed. And don't even get me started on how many napkins I went through trying to clean myself up. It was embarrassing. And yet, somehow, a week later, Lisa dragged me back. Yep, you read that right. I went again. I'll explain why, because honestly, the second time was a whole different story. But first, let me tell you something funny about that first swing party. You ready? This was the moment I started to think, maybe this is just what I needed after all. Okay, so I'm standing there, covered in ketchup, still, trying to look cool, and there's this guy named Robert. Robert's a mess. I mean, the dude was already drunk when he showed up. I swear he could barely stand. But for some reason he got really attached to a pillow. No idea why, but he was glued to it like it was his life raft in a storm. And now the most interesting thing is that Robert, in his absolute drunkenness, starts smearing his personal mayonnaise all over the pillow, as if it were his new art project. I don't know what he was thinking at the time, but he definitely had a personal idea at the time, I kid you not. Just slathering it on there like he was making a sandwich. The whole time people are watching him laughing, but honestly, I felt kind of bad for him. It was so ridiculous. But then the best part. He fell asleep on the pillow. I'm standing there, watching this man sleep on a mayo-smeared pillow in the middle of a party. And I thought to myself, is this real life? You know what? It was real life. And it was hilarious. So, yeah, that's how I knew this whole swing thing wasn't as bad as I thought. So that's the first chapter in my swing party adventures. Not a pretty start, but hey, you know me, I roll with the punches. Let's just say, I've got some wild stories to tell from here. And before I go on, I'll leave you with a question. Would you ever go to a swing party? Or am I just the weird one? Let me know in the comments below. Seriously. This story is crazy, but before we dive in, don't ask me how I remember everything so well. I just want to say, I have a ton of footage from all the swing parties I've been to. And yes, however, unfortunately, none of that stuff is gonna make it to this video. Let's talk about one party I will never, ever forget. It was my 12th swing party. Yeah, you're probably wondering, why 12? Why not a more significant number? But honestly, by then, they were starting to blend together and I was a little too used to the chaos. But the 12th. Oh, this one stands out for a lot of reasons. So, I decided to host this one at my place. Big mistake. Maybe. But I thought, why not? It'd be low-key, at least I thought it would be. Turns out. Let me paint the picture for you. There were 8 guys and 6 girls. Sounds like a decent ratio, right? But then again, we all know how that works out when the energy starts going in a certain direction. Things can get a little intense. Now, here's the thing. This party wasn't like the others. The vibe started off okay. Some casual chatting, some drinks, a lot of laughter. But then it quickly turned into something a little more chaotic. I'm not sure if it was the alcohol or the energy in the room, but before I knew it, things were moving fast. Like really fast. The guys. Oh, they didn't waste any time. It was like a rush. And no, not a nice, slow build-up. More like a stampede of intensity that hit all at once. I swear I could barely keep up. It felt like a whirlwind. Honestly. I wasn't ready for what happened next. I mean, I've been to these parties before, right? You know the drill. Things can get physical, but this was something else. The amount of, activity in such a small space was overwhelming. I'm not just talking about the number of people involved. I'm talking about how intense it all was. To tell you the truth, it was simultaneous and many tools were used at once. My body did not appreciate it. For a couple of days after that party, I couldn't sit properly. I was sore in places I didn't even know existed. Let's just say I had a hard time even getting through a simple Netflix binge without needing a cushion. Not cute. Not glamorous. Just pure discomfort. I don't know how I didn't faint from all the intensity. It felt like my body was reeling for days after. But, I'm all about that post-party recovery, right? I'll admit, though, I didn't plan on it getting so overwhelming. The thing is, when you're surrounded by a bunch of people who are just going at it, it's hard to keep your cool. And yes, I was feeling pretty beat up by the end of it. But that's what you get when you mix a high-energy group with way too much enthusiasm. Oh, and let me tell you about the guy who was with a gift. There was this man at the party who, let's just say, had a little bit of a situation going on. He had, some issues and it was not a pleasant sight. I'm talking about someone who was visibly uncomfortable, and it honestly grossed me out. I won't go into details, but imagine you're at a party and you notice someone with hemorrhoids. It was one of those moments where I was like, am I dreaming or is this really happening? The whole situation was so awkward, I couldn't even look at him. I had to turn away at one point, because I was genuinely about to lose my lunch. There was this whole incident where my friend had to, help him out in the most awkward way. I'm still cringing just thinking about it. I can't even describe it properly without feeling some type of way. But let me tell you, there are some things you can't unsee. And that party. Yeah, that moment stayed with me for a while. I have many more similar stories with such moments, but I won't tell you about them because they are disgusting. Oh, what I will tell you next will be something with something. I hope you will like it. Now, I'll be honest. I've been to so many swing parties that I've kind of lost count. At this point, I can't even tell you if it was the 18th or the 19th one. All I know is, it was at Lisa's house, and Lisa? Well, let me just say, she's one of a kind. She's the queen of creating weird games. And no, I'm not talking about your average board games. I'm talking about games that are so off the wall, you're left wondering, how did I end up in this situation? So, yeah, I think it was either the 18th or 19th swing party at her place. It was one of those nights where we were all feeling a little more experimental, and there were quite a few of us there. But, as usual, the men definitely outnumbered the women. That's just how it goes sometimes, right? But here's the kicker, there was this old guy at the party. I'm talking about someone who had to be at least 50 years old. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with older guys, but this man, he was a whole vibe. He hadn't shaved in like years. His beard was wild, like he hadn't even bothered to trim it or anything. Honestly, it looked like he was trying to go for the I live off the land aesthetic, but failed miserably. And, of course, this is where things get interesting. Lisa, in her infinite wisdom, decides that tonight's theme is going to be hospital, which, yeah, sounds weird, but I don't know, sometimes it works at these parties. So we all got really into it, like everyone was in character. There were nurses, doctors, patients, and, well, you get the picture. And I was assigned the role of the nurse. Now, normally I wouldn't mind that. But oh no, tonight. It wasn't just any nurse job. I had to play the part of someone who had to help this old guy after his mysterious snake bite incident. Now, mind you, no one actually got bitten by a snake, but this is how Lisa's games go. She's the type of person who will take a completely random situation and turn it into an over-the-top scenario. So there I was in my nurse outfit, which was pretty much just a white dress, ready to tend to this guy. But here's the twist. Lisa said the only way to save him was to suck out the poison. Suck out the poison. Like, I didn't sign up for this kind of roleplay. But I'm a good sport, so I just went with it. I mean, I figured it would be just a goofy part of the game, right? I want to say that the idea of this game was a snake bite into his instrument. But as I'm getting closer, things took a seriously strange turn. Out of the blue, this old man starts peeing. Like right then and there. In the middle of the game, in front of everyone. I'm talking full-on no-holds-barred, just peeing. And I thought to myself, is this real life? Am I actually seeing this? I mean, I literally froze for a second. I didn't know whether to laugh or run for the hills. And, of course, like any swung party these days, there were cameras everywhere. People were filming everything, just waiting for the drama to unfold. They were all loving it. Meanwhile, I was just standing there, completely disgusted and trying not to lose my lunch. It was honestly like something out of a bad dream. So, naturally, I did what anyone would do in that situation. I ran away. Yep, I just bolted. I wasn't about to stay around for whatever was coming next. It was one of those moments where you think, did I just step into a weird episode of The Twilight Zone, because it felt so surreal? After that whole disaster, the old guy was promptly escorted out by the rest of the crew. I'm sure he was confused, but at that point, we were all just trying to recover from the train wreck we'd witnessed. I mean, it's one thing to play a weird game, but when bodily fluids start entering the equation, yeah, that's where I draw the line. Honestly, after all that chaos, I had zero interest in continuing the night. I was like, nope, I'm out. I just grabbed my stuff, said my goodbyes and left. I wasn't even going to try to salvage anything after that. I was done for the night, done for the week, honestly. That was my limit. So, there you have it, the one party I'll never forget, no matter how much I try. Honestly, it was one of those times where I thought, this is going down in history as one of the weirdest moments of my life. But hey, that's the thing about these parties, right? You never know what's going to happen. It's like anything can turn into something unforgettable. Let me know. Have you ever been in a situation where things just went way off the rails? Drop your stories in the comments. It's a mix of pain, laughs, and, well, never again. But hey, that's what makes these parties so interesting, right? This happened not long ago, about 2 weeks ago actually. I'm not exactly sure which party it was, but I think it was the 30-second swing party. At this point, I've kind of lost track, honestly. But let me tell you, this party was memorable. Not necessarily for the good reasons, though, so fair warning. It all started with one of Lisa's infamous role-playing games. You know how she is, always coming up with the most ridiculous, out-there scenarios. You could be minding your own business, just having a nice chat, and then she's like, okay, I've got this crazy idea. And you know there's no backing out at that point, right? So, yeah, this particular night, Lisa announced that she had come up with the most insane game yet. She told us it would be crazy and a little painful, and because I'm always up for something new and a little offbeat, I decided to sign up. Big mistake. Maybe. But at that point I was curious about how this game was going to play out. Here's the premise. Lisa assigned me the role of a sink. Yes, you heard that right. I was supposed to be a sink. I had to wash tools while sitting on. Well, let's just say it wasn't exactly the most comfortable setup. It wasn't painful in the way you might imagine, but the whole situation had this weird, uncomfortable vibe to it. It was one of those "what am I doing here" moments. But hey, that's kind of the charm of these parties. You agree to the weirdest things and then somehow end up in the middle of a bizarre scenario. But, it didn't stop there. No. Lisa's role was even more out there. She was supposed to be cleaning the tunnels. No, I'm not talking about some underground network here. Tunnels, as in a very specific part of the game. She had to clean. Well, you can probably guess where that was headed. But the less said about that, the better. It was one of those roles that sounded funny at first, but, in practice, was a lot more intense than I was ready for. Now, here's where it gets interesting. As I was sitting there, let's just say, doing my sync duties, I started to notice something weird. There was this awful taste lingering in the air. And no, I'm not talking about the tunnels. I'm talking about a taste that made me want to vomit and never return. It wasn't even about the role play, it was just... something was off. I can't even describe it properly without cringing. But the worst part, I had no idea where this taste was coming from. It was so bad that I had to take a minute to process what was going on. I looked around at the others, and honestly, it felt like a scene from a nightmare. I was starting to question everything. Is this real? Am I dreaming? Why is this happening? Lisa later told me that it was a bad situation for both of us. Lisa used her tongue to clean the tunnels. But let me tell you, if I had been given the role of tunnel cleaner, I would have tapped out right then and there. I would have just raised my hand and said, "Nope, I'm out. I'll wash dishes at home instead, thank you." 'Cause, seriously, no one wants to deal with that. Anyway, after I managed to escape the chaos for a little while and shake off the weird vibes, I just couldn't handle the rest of the game. I mean, how can you after something like that? I politely excused myself from the game and decided to take a break. But the taste. Oh, it lingered for hours. I will never unsmell that taste. It's a part of me now. One of those things that just sticks with you. And no matter how many times I've been to one of these parties, I've never experienced anything quite like it. And I'm not even talking about Lisa. When it was over, she complained to me about how bad of an idea it was. She said she would never clean the tunnels again because the taste was not very good, to put it mildly. That point I was done. I wasn't going to stay for the rest of the party. It wasn't even about the role play anymore. It was just the feeling of, I need a break from everything. And that's exactly what I did. I quietly slipped out of the room, avoided the cameras, and just went home. No more games for me. No more weird roles that leave you questioning your entire existence. Looking back on it, though, I laugh. I can't help but laugh. Sure, it was weird and it was uncomfortable, but that's what makes these parties memorable, right? They're a mix of the absurd, the intense, and sometimes the downright uncomfortable. But that's what makes the stories worth telling. So what about you? Have you ever been part of a game or situation that was just so strange, you couldn't stop thinking about it afterward? Let me know your craziest stories in the comments. The last story for today. And I've got to admit, this one was a bit of a turning point for me. It's funny, it's awkward, and honestly, it made me reconsider going to these parties anymore. But it's a story worth sharing, so buckle up because this one gets a little out there. This all went down about a month ago. So, it was me, Lisa, and Camila, my two closest friends. And you know how it is with friends. They pull you into all sorts of wild situations. Camila, by the way, is a little more reserved than Lisa, but she's got this quiet toughness to her that makes her interesting. She's not the loud one in the group, but when she makes a decision, she sticks to it. So, the party was at Camila's place, and let me tell you, when I showed up, I was shocked by how much she had gone all out. She had prepared everything, the space, the music, the whole setup. But, the vibe, not what I was expecting. I thought it was going to be a chill night like the usual ones we've had before, but nope. This one was different. When I walked in, there were, let's just say, some intense equipment scattered around the room. Camila had clearly gone for something more experimental. It wasn't just the typical setup. There were these huge things, and no, I'm not just talking about the decor. I was staring at some of these things thinking, what exactly am I getting myself into? Now, if you know Lisa, you know she's into role-playing games. She loves the creativity of it, and that's cool, I get it. But Camila, she's more about going for big. Not just figuratively, but literally. She wasn't about the subtle stuff. No, she grabbed the biggest equipment, the largest props, and I was like, oh wow, I wasn't prepared for this level of intensity. But what can you do, right? You're already there, and you've committed. But here's the thing. Camila's enthusiasm for the evening kind of took everyone by surprise. She was totally in her element, and honestly, I could see why she was enjoying herself. But the men at the party, yeah, they weren't exactly on the same page. It was kind of this awkward push-pull scenario. Camila wasn't taking no for an answer. She had this energy, this determination to get people to join in, even if they were hesitant. At one point I just kind of stepped back and watched everything unfold. Not because I wanted to, but because it was like watching a train wreck. You can't look away. I felt like an outsider in that moment. It was painful to witness. Not in the physical sense, but more in the emotional sense. It was like watching people get swept up in something they didn't want to be a part of, and I could see the discomfort written on their faces. By the end of the night, things got a little too intense for my liking. It wasn't about the equipment or the role play. It was about how everyone was acting in this environment that felt like it was spiraling out of control. Camila, who had been in her own world the entire evening, started doing things that made me feel uncomfortable. Honestly, I felt trapped in that moment, like I wanted the night to end immediately. Camila, at the end of the party, she started licking my ears and Lisa's ears. I stood there and didn't know what to do. As soon as it wrapped up, I was ready to go. I didn't care about the after-party gossip, the laughter, or whatever else was going on. I just needed out. I made my exit, but what happened the next day totally threw me for a loop. So, the next morning I was out with Lisa, grabbing some coffee, trying to shake off the craziness of the night before. We're walking down the street when, out of nowhere, Camila appears. She's walking right toward us with this big smile on her face, like nothing ever happened. She waves at us and says, "Hey, how are you guys? Wanna do the party again sometime soon?" And let me tell you, my heart dropped. I was shocked. Like, how do you even react to that? After everything that went down, she was just casually asking if we wanted to do it all over again. I had no idea what to say. I couldn't even muster up the energy to make a joke about it. I just kind of stared at her, blinking. So, yeah, after that I took a 2-week break from the whole swing party scene. I couldn't even think about going to another one. Not after the chaos of that night. Honestly, I was done for a while. I needed time to process, to think about what I wanted from these experiences and whether I was actually enjoying them or just going along for the ride because it was expected. I wrote this story so that you could learn from my mistakes. And I am by no means recommending these parties. But it is definitely a reminder that you need to be careful what you get involved in. Sometimes we get caught up in the excitement or the pressure, and before we know it, we're in a situation that doesn't feel right. I learned from that party, and I say to you, take a step back and think about whether you are doing something because you want to or because you feel you have to. So my advice, don't make the same mistakes I did. Know your boundaries. Take care of yourself. And don't let anyone pressure you into something that doesn't feel right. If you learn from my mistakes, then maybe it'll save you from making the same ones.